Hi, I'm Shaul. Some of you have been asking me about specific lenses. You've been asking me what I think about a lens, about its rendering, how dimensional it is, etc. As if I were some kind of authority. Well, I do not have any authority on these matters. It's a rather subjective matter. Each of us have our own feeling for the photos we see. We have our own tastes, and those things are sadly not objectively measurable. So, what I've been trying to do on this channel is give you some shortcuts, some tools to be able to predict the rendering of a lens based on its design and other clues. However, those shortcuts do not relieve you from doing your own due diligence. And by that I mean looking at a lot, hundreds of sample images made by a certain lens until you get the feel for its rendering, what the images look like, how true to life they look to you, subjectively. And only then you may come to a conclusion about that lens, whether you like it or you don't. Well, let's move on to the subject of this video. One of the easiest ways to predict the rendering of a lens is to simply look at its introduction year. You see, in lens design, there was a golden era. In the period between about 1992 and 2012, I would say that about 90% of the prime lenses introduced will give you a good dimensional rendering. It was a rather long era that is sadly over now. Once upon a time, until the early 1950s, a photographic lens was just a machined metal barrel where a few slabs of glass, flint or crown glass, were positioned in order to give the lens its focal length, its characteristics. Those round disc-like slabs of glass were molded and then individually hand-grinded in order to give them the desired curvature, so they function properly in the lens. The glass used was not coated, which made lenses very susceptible to reflections, reducing the contrast every time a light source was included in the frame or just outside the frame. And sometimes the contrast was low at wide apertures too, regardless of the light conditions. Now, in the early 1950s, coatings were introduced, which reduced the intensity of those reflections and enabled a slow but steady increase in contrast over time. Coatings got better and better until they reached their peak performance in the early 1990s. Another development was the replacement of lead in high refractive index glass by Lanthanum. Lead or classic flint glass has a very low Aber number, which means it is highly susceptible to dispersion, to chromatic aberration. It produces even more dispersion than our eyes, which further lowered the contrast at high apertures. However, lanthanum, the element that replaced lead due to safety regulations, is very similar to our eyes in terms of its sensitivity to light dispersion. But it has the same refractive index as lead. So high refractive index containing lanthanum or lanthanum oxide imitate the optical characteristics of our own eyes, and that makes the images they produce more true to life. By the early 1990s, lead glass was out of production, at least in the Western world. I think that old or even more recent Soviet lenses still contained lead elements. And this is why lenses like the Jupiters, the 8 and the 9, still have this low contrast. The term fast lens is a little bit conceiving. You see, back in the day, lenses were not supposed to be used at the widest aperture, not to make photographs anyway. The wide aperture allowed more light to get into the viewfinder, and that really helped with manual focusing. The focusing aids at the time, specifically the split prism in the middle of the focusing screen, needs a lot of light to be useful. Even in moderate light, like indoors, the split prism often becomes dark, too dark to be used for focusing. And a wide aperture lens allows more light into the viewfinder, so the focusing becomes easier. I think that the term fast lens refers to the speed of manual focusing. The hand grinding involved in lens manufacturing meant that sample variation between different copies of the same type of lenses was an issue. Couple it with some misalignment between the light paths in a reflex camera and the images shot at wide apertures of f1.4 or f2 were rarely really focused properly. They were rarely sharp. But then shallow depth of field was not a desirable aspect of the photograph, except for portraits. Here I have a book, an anthology of work made by photographers who worked for the Life magazine. This book represents the photojournalistic work made in the 20th century in a quite comprehensive manner. Now, if we look at different photos made in this book, you can hardly see any background separation made on purpose when light conditions allowed for a smaller aperture. Background separation was more of a side effect caused by either the need to photograph in low light or the use of telephoto lenses. Background separation is intrinsic to the optical characteristics. It's physics. In my opinion, the preference for a larger depth of field was a cultural thing. You see, during the Cold War, the world did not feel very safe. It was full of conspiracies, of fear of nuclear war, full of spies everywhere. So photographers try to make their images more revealing, to contain a lot of detail and context. The term bokeh, which in Japanese describes the aesthetics of the out of focus areas, was not introduced to the Western world until 1997. And that concept simply didn't exist before that. It's only recently that the nature of popular photography has shifted to, and the blurry background became desired aesthetic aspect of a photograph. In the mid-1980s, autofocus was introduced into the cameras and lenses. Nearly every lens introduced after 1990 had some type of autofocus capability. Now, autofocus relieved the requirement of the photographer to manually focus the lens. So the split prism became a thing of the past. At that time, the use of wide aperture for actual image making became an issue. Manufacturers competed with each other for the best fast glass. That included primes, of course, which gained a useful f1.4 or f2 aperture, but also for zooms, where faster f2.8 zooms became legitimate tools for the professional photographers. The last development that enabled making consistently good lenses starting in the beginning of the 90s was the introduction of more automation and standardization of quality control processes in lens manufacturing, which made sample variation a lot smaller and optical quality more trustworthy. All of these things, all of these developments enabled the production of consistently good lenses in a serial production procedure. Lenses such as this Nikon 20 to 35 f2.8 was not possible before about 1990. It has a rather complex construction. Importantly, by the early 90s, ED glass or other types of special glass were left out of lens manufacturing, except for some lucrative telephoto lenses where chromatic aberration is really enlarged and needs to be addressed. Lenses, most of them, still contained only flint and crown glass, just like all lenses made since the beginning of photography. Lenses introduced during the golden era of lens design, 1992 to 2012, were perfectly adequate for any conceivable purpose. And I would like to argue they still are. They are truly dimensional, creating those true-to-life, pleasing rendering. In 2012, Nikon introduced the D800, never heard of before 36 megapixel camera. The early users of that camera noticed that that sensor was too detailed. to make the most of those lenses. So a new era of lens design become where the resolving power requirements became more intensive. Nearly every lens introduced since 2012 contains ED glass, even wide lenses where chromatic aberrations are less of a problem. Those lenses are designed to resolve more detail, and they are less pleasing in their rendering. Well, I think so anyway. Images are flatter, more clinical. Manufacturers have been chasing their own tail to match that ever increasing resolution of the sensors. That trend is exacerbated by the shift to mirrorless designs that enable lenses with less compromises. The new trend is very fast zoom lenses that are perfectly usable wide open, which were never possible with reflex cameras. Each of those fast zooms contain multiple ED elements that really compromise the rendering, the look of the images, making them very flat, very removed from what we experience with our own eyes. I would like to argue that divergence in the camera industry is desperately needed. Let the specialists have their own gear, those very detailed, high-resolution cameras and highly clinical resolving power lenses. And let the masses have their own gear. Cameras with up to about 24 megapixels, with a pixel pitch not smaller than 6 microns, would make the most of those slightly older lenses that are not as good in resolving detail, but that create perfectly pleasing images. Images with some juice in them, with some life. That I believe is what we would like to see. Such lenses are still being produced these days, but they are few and far between. I think that only Nikon has been making such lenses consistently in the past 2 years. However, there are plenty of such lenses on the used market. Canon has the early EF lenses, and especially the L series, which has a very good, pleasing rendering. Nikon has dozens of such lenses, especially the older one, the D-glass lenses, but also the G f1.4 primes are mostly very dimensional, very pleasing in their rendering. Pentax and Sony Minolta also produce many such lenses, and I can be easily adapted to any mirrorless camera. Those lenses aren't very expensive either. Of course, some of them are, but their prices have been declining. They are not as fashionable these days. And there are a lot of opportunities to enjoy them in a seamless way, taking advantage of their autofocusing capabilities and their wide aperture. So thank you for watching, and see you again soon.